Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Mrs. Mummypenny Talks. We are all the way on to episode 12 of season 4 now, and very excited. I always start by saying I'm very excited because every episode excites me, but we're going to be talking about pensions, and I have joining me probably the ultimate expert on pensions. Possibly,
Thank
probably.
you.
So I'm joined by ROMI SAVOVA, who is the CEO of PensionBee. Now, I must declare my commercial interests. So I am an ambassador of PensionBee, and we have been working together for, I'm going to say, about 4 or 5 years now. When I knew nothing about pensions, now I know a lot, but nowhere near what you do.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. So, and I think what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about some of the practical basics of pensions, but then because we've got Romy here, then I want to talk about the future of pensions and some of the more controversial sides, the gender pension gap, and just stuff that we need to be genuinely talking about, because there's a lot of issues in the pensions world that make it pensions are not boring and dull. They
Agreed.
are just a tool that's going to provide us with money when we don't want to work anymore. So,
which makes them a great thing to be saving for. All of the things that you want to spend on in the future can come out of your pension. It's just thinking about funding future you.
Yeah, exactly. It's that simple. So, right, where we need to start then is we need to go back to the beginning. Why on earth did you set up a company to sort out a problem you saw in the pensions world? And where did you come from? What's your background and stuff?
Well, I had a very traditional corporate background, and I did most of my time at Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. So I actually knew the financial services landscape pretty well as a banker. But I hadn't quite experienced it as a consumer until it came time to move my own pension. And what I encountered is just a bunch of pension companies that don't want to talk to their customers. They refer you to websites that don't make sense, to advisors who don't want to take you on, and just anywhere but there.
Yeah.
And so I finally managed to move my own pension, but learned a lot along the way, and realized that with automatic enrollment, which means that virtually every single person working would get a pension at some point, that most people would probably have problems navigating the system that's just too complicated. And it felt like a huge business opportunity, but also a huge opportunity to do something positive for people that would make it easier for them to enjoy their later lives. And those two things combined really well with, the kinds of changes and the difference that I want to see in the world. And so it was too compelling of an opportunity not to pursue.
But how do you so you've got this amazing idea, like I had an amazing idea back in 2013, but it was an idea that I could just progress by myself. Was it the same concept of setting up a business? It was your idea and you just went for it?
Well, every business starts with one person, and then it's 2 people, and then 3, 4, and 5, and so on in our case. Because PensionBee is very technology led, I started working with the CTO of our company pretty much since day one. Right. And we tend to divide the technology aspects of the business and the financial aspects of the business fairly evenly between us. And yes, we did realize quite early on that, we wanted to reach consumers, and we wanted to demystify pensions and make sure that, people weren't afraid of this product. This is a great product. But there is this confusion and complexity surrounding it. So we very quickly got on board someone to help with marketing, who is now our CMO and who has also been with us since inception, someone to lead on the operational front, because we invest so much in customer service, but all of it has been organic and led by what we believe our customers want. And that has always been, what's driven us forward and made us grow in the ways that we've grown.
No, it's amazing, isn't it, that the idea of just ping in your head and suddenly you've got this huge company that you IPO'd, earlier this year, so that you floated on the stock market. I shouldn't use too many 3-letter acronyms. Yeah, it's a big company.
Yes, and it's been a journey, but from where we look at it, the journey really continues, because pensions impact so many people. One of the most amazing things is that most people already have a pension. Yeah. It's not like other financial products where you have to go out and sort of acquire one from scratch. Yeah. Most people are given a pension by their employer, which means that there are a lot of people who have pensions, and it's really those people that need help. And we have grown a lot, but we are still very much in the early stages of our growth journey, which is why our growth rate continues to be so high. We think we can reach millions of people, whereas quite recently we announced that we have over 100,000 invested customers.
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter. So right, let's go back to basics with pensions then, and we will talk in very basic terms, because there's no point complicating something that actually isn't complicated. So I suppose split it into employed and self-employed. That's almost the best way to look at it. So and I'll use myself as an example. You might want to use yourself as an example as well. So I've worked for various companies. Sometimes I've opted out, which is very naughty, and my biggest financial regret, because I worked for Tesco's in my 20s and I earned a really good salary, and it was a DB pension, which is a very valuable form of pension, and I opted out. And if I could even imagine how much that's worth now, I can't, because it made me cry. Anyway, I opted out, but it's changed now. The laws have changed, and you automatically opted in to your pension schemes.
Yes,
which is good. You can opt out, but I would highly guide you not to opt out, because your employer is giving you free money, and there are tax benefits.
Absolutely.
Win.
It would be like saying no to an extra 50 or 100 pounds. That's the equivalent of opting out.
Yeah, totally. And that's what I did in my 20s. So well done, Lynn. But then I worked for a couple of companies, but my salary had gone up, so that was good. So the contributions were good. So then in 2015, I left the corporate world, and I was like, pensions, don't really understand what's going on there, so let's just forget about them. And then I think it was Mark from your marketing team who reached out to me in 2015, 2016, and was like, oh, why don't you do some work with PensionBee? And I'm like, I don't know anything about pensions. They're in a mess. I think I've got 2 pots. And then, so you basically helped me to figure out what was going on with my pensions and consolidated them into the same place. But so we're talking like 5 years ago. And it was a pain to consolidate those 2 funds. Should we name and shame brands?
Oh, you know what? They've gotten better now.
They have gotten better.
And so I don't want to punish them for their old sins.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yes, it can be tricky. And there's something like 40,000 different pension schemes in the country.
No.
Which is a lot, right? So there is a lot of variability in terms of how complicated your transfer is. We obviously exist to help make it as easy as possible and to guide you through it, even when the pension providers are throwing obstacles in your way. I'm not going to say that everyone is perfect now, but I think the major ones at least have improved a lot since 2015.
Yeah, and to be fair, like a lot of people have been lobbying for it, so they've had to change. Yeah, it was a little bit painful back then when I did mine, but it took like a couple of months, and then all my money was nicely neat and tidy in one place, and I put my money into the tracker fund. So what with PensionBee, it's pretty, I don't want this to come across as an advert either, although I have already declared that the commercial relationship, but you can choose, like there's some funds you can choose from. A fund is just a group of different shares. I originally put my money into the tracker fund because the fees were really low.
Yeah, it's the cheapest product we have. That's right.
Yeah, 0.5%.
Yep,
which is for an investment, that's a cheap fee.
Indeed, yeah.
No
And
cost fee, sorry, not cheap.
we also offer discounts for when your pension exceeds £100,000. And a lot, it sounds like a big number, but actually, as you continue saving through life, and you get closer to retirement and all of your contributions from your working life build up, it's quite likely that you will. And so we, at that point, we also reduce the fees for the amount over the 100,000. So our customers can keep getting the benefit of lower fees as their pension pots grow.
Yeah. And actually, I'm just about to break 100 grand. So I'm really quite, because I've been focusing really hard on putting money into my pension the last sort of couple of years, because I opted out of my pension in my 20s. I have a big, and also because I took a break from my pension when I had my children. I've got a huge pension gap. So
well, virtually every woman finds themselves in that situation. The pension gap really, starts from, I would say, your early 30s. And because of the way investments work, and the fact that your returns are reinvested, and then the returns of those returns are reinvested. If you have a shortfall relative to your male peers at any point in time, the investing world actually tends to magnify that over time. And so the gap between you and your male peers grows bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes on, which isn't really fair, because the reason there is a gap in the first place is because women are doing all of this free work, looking after children and looking after relatives, and and doing other things really that are very, very productive and helpful for everybody in society, except for their own pensions.
Yeah, it makes me really angry. And I know I've written about it. I've written about it for you. I've written about it for like newspapers and stuff, because one of the solutions is like, so if you're in a traditional relationship with two of you, obviously that's not traditional. 42% of marriages end up in divorce, me being one of them. But if you can somehow balance it better between you and your partner, like you can transfer pension contributions between you. It's totally possible, isn't it? Like,
yes, you can balance the pension contributions, and you can also balance the work. And our latest research showed that if men and women spend an equal amount of time in childcare, and actually there are a lot of men who would love to spend more time looking after their children, and employers need to facilitate that. But if we were able to do that as a society, then women and men would actually work, similar hours in paid employment, and therefore earn similar wages. And actually, that is the way to make sure that that things are fair. Otherwise, the gender pay gap persists, and wherever there's a gender pay gap, there's going to be a gender pensions gap.
Yeah, and that ultimately goes back to the government, doesn't it? And the policies they set in place, and laws that the companies are governed to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. And the government should be doing more to enable men to take paid time off to look after their children, much in the same way as we've been promoting better maternity leave for women. And in the meantime, though, I guess it's not, we can't make the government change their ways in the span of a few weeks, although we do have a budget coming up, you never know. And in the meantime, I think the most important thing for women in particular is to know about this and to take action as early as possible, because of that compounding impact of investments. So a contribution of £5,000 in your 20s is more valuable than a contribution of £5,000 in your 40s or 50s, because you give it more time to grow. And so if you want to take, counteracting action, really the key thing is to start as early as possible.
No, absolutely. Start as early as possible, and don't opt out like Lynn did in her 20s. But also, it's never too late to start.
Absolutely.
Is the other really important point, because and we'll go on to self-employed as well, but me as a self-employed person, I have so many friends, colleagues, journalists who don't have a pension, and often that question is, if I've left it too late, what's the point?
Have I missed the boat? Yeah, absolutely not. The government makes it so attractive for you to put money into your pension. So if you put money into a personal pension like PensionBee, we automatically claim a 25% tax top up for you. Yeah. So for every £100 you put in, we will get an extra 25 for you from HMRC. Yeah. And so it's never too late to start, to start getting something like that. And if you are a higher or additional rate taxpayer, then you can get even more through your self-assessment, which of course self-employed people kind of file, as kind of, as habits. But actually some employed people need to consider filing too, because if they're in a higher tax bracket, then they can get extra money back on their tax return from the government after they've paid into a pension.
That's a really good point, actually. And I never completed a tax return when I was employed. Never, ever.
And our research found that actually people leave billions, collectively leave billions in tax relief that they didn't get back from the government for their pension contributions.
Yeah, I think I did as well, because I was a higher rate taxpayer and I was contributing to a pension. Damn, that's more money I've missed out on. Oh my God.
Well, I think there is a time limit to look into it and see if you can get it back. I think it might be several years, but worth trying.
Right. Thanks. I'm gonna check that out. It's probably 7 years. It's probably that 7-year rule.
If it's the 7-year rule, then
I will check and I will confirm in the show notes.
Okay.
Brilliant. So and I suppose the other thing let's talk a bit more about when you're self-employed. So when you are self-employed, all the onus is on you to set up your pension. So I was lucky because I had a pension pot from my employed career, but many of us have been employed for a certain period of time, and particularly women, there's a natural tendency for a lot of women to do that employed work, and then once life gets too complicated with children, and not just caring for children, you might be caring for, as you mentioned, like parents or relatives as well. Quite often women step into self-employed work. So the onus is on you to set up your pension, but the tax breaks are still there. I'm a limited company, so it's slightly different for me, where I basically put my pension through as a business expense, and I save on my 19% corporation tax.
Absolutely.
Yes, which it is 19% at the moment. That is changing soon.
I think it's going up. Yeah.
It's something like if your profit, I don't know the facts. Something like if your profit is less than 50,000 or something.
Okay.
I need to check that. I'll put that in the notes as well.
Okay. But yes, you can do it either as a sole trader or if you have a limited company, and either way you can get the tax breaks from the government.
Yeah. So on that note then, because I'd love to get your view. So you've got, when we talk about long-term savings, or say you've got some excess money in your monthly budget, let's say you've got 500 quid, you've got sort of three, and I'm being very general here, you've got three options of what you can do with your money. You can put more money into your pension, you can invest it, let's say in a stocks and shares ISA, or you can overpay your mortgage. Those tend to be the three big things. So and everybody's like, what's your view on that? Like, are you just going to say the same thing that I always say, which is it depends on you and what your attitude to risk and your goals? But
well, that is true. It really does depend on you. But I think that there are some general tips on how to make that decision. I guess if you are weighing those three options, then the biggest one that we usually encounter, the biggest fork, is, do I invest, which would include the ISA or the pension, or do I pay down my mortgage? And really that depends on, what your mortgage rate is. And, if you have a very expensive mortgage and you are uncomfortable with the debt that you have, then you may want to consider, making payments there. But in general, if you don't have a very expensive mortgage, then for most people, it's, it remains quite affordable to keep their mortgage. And now you want to be keeping an eye out on interest rates, because the government has signaled that interest rates could be going up, and that may impact your mortgage. So something to keep in mind, and to think about whether you are comfortable with that monthly deduction leaving your bank account. And if you are comfortable, then generally speaking, if you look at sort of the interest rate that you pay on a mortgage and you compare that to the average annual rates of return that pensions have had over the long term, which is around 7%, then it the sort of the relative difference suggests that an investment like a pension may be a better use of your money, as long as you do remain comfortable with that mortgage. That's my view on it, of course. And if you look then at pensions versus ISAs, the key two things to bear in mind are, when might I need this money? And you're a huge advocate for making sure that you have what I'm going to politely call an emergency fund,
rather than spend.
If you already have your emergency fund, then you feel that you have enough savings for the short term, then usually it makes more sense to put the money into a pension, because you get the most generous tax benefits from the government for putting it into a pension relative to putting it into an ordinary ISA.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm a mathematician, so I can't get past the maths of it.
Yeah.
So as in my mortgage, I have a big mortgage that I am very uncomfortable with, but the mortgage rate, as in it's 320 grand, right? And for a woman, a single mum by herself, that's a pressure. But my mortgage rate is 1.39%.
Yeah.
So I know every month that 1,200 quid, 800 pounds of that is paying off my debt. 400 pounds of that is interest, which I know 400 pounds a month in interest is a lot, but it's a 25-year mortgage, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I also know that, so you're quoting average rates for pensions and investments, which is absolutely the only prudent thing you should ever mention. But I also know that my pension and my ISA have performed higher than that over the last sort of 5 years. So as a prudent accountant, actually, I have to always, in fact, I use 5% in any of my graphs that I do for average.
I think 5% is prudent, because yes, investments have done really, really well since 2008, I would say. However, there are going to be periods of downturn. That's fine. Actually, periods of downturn are usually a better time to put money into your pension, because you're effectively getting the market on sale, which is great. But 5 to 7%, I would say, for pension returns is the long-term average that I would use to compare against your against your mortgage rate. And if your pension does better, great.
Yeah, and I just can't get past 1.4% for my mortgage versus, let's use 5% for my
5%.
my pension, and the tax breaks with pension, because that's so the way I'm balancing, and this is just me, it's just my view, my opinion of personal money. I'm probably doing a 90-10 split between my pension and investments, as in I'm putting 90% of my spare cash into my pension, 10% into my stocks and shares ISA.
Your stocks and shares ISA has the advantage of, if you want to take the money out on on a relatively short-term basis, and if you want to spend it on something that you love or need, then you can do that. With the pension, it's generally there until the age of 55 and 57, actually, from 2028 onwards.
Yes. And I suppose the other thing, well, maybe let's move on to the future of pensions, because we don't actually know what's going to happen in the future to pensions. And there's so many theories out there, isn't it? Like that. So you can you'll be able to access your private pension at the age of 57 at the moment, but the government might change that because we are an aging population an aging population that costs a lot of money in our later age through healthcare. So I anticipate that private pension accessibility age to go up. And also you've got state pension. We should also cover off state pension as well, where the basics of state pension. So at the moment you can access it at the age of 66. But again, that age is going up. So by the time we're that age, it's going to be 67, but it may well get older. And to access full state pension, which at the moment is £179.60, because we'll talk about my state pension challenge as well. You have to have contributed 35 years worth of national insurance, which you can check on the government website. I will put a link. It's always worth knowing how many years worth of contributions you've got, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I will say about the state pension, having just lived for a week off of £179.60, including bills that Faith and I did with you guys, it was absolute hell on earth. I'm sure you've read the
I have.
That Faith and I wrote.
I have, but you guys did get pretty creative, I have to say, in terms of how to spend that money. But I totally see why it's a reality shock. Because especially when you're working, you tend to enjoy a lot of things. You enjoy takeouts, you enjoy trips out, you enjoy holidays, you want to enjoy life, and that doesn't change when you retire. I think if anything, you have more free time to enjoy life.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it was horrible. And I did, it's probably one of the hardest challenges I've ever done. And I've done loads of like physical sort of exercise challenges. But the crux of it was that almost like my coping mechanisms are being able to spend money and eat food. And that's how I treat myself. And I wasn't able to do either of those things that week. So it really affected it did affect my mental health. And I'm not blaming you for putting me, because I was the one who came up with the idea for the challenge. It was just really impactful. And ever since the challenge, I've been very mindful about but the little things I spend money on. Like I have been taking coffee out from home in my takeaway cup.
That's a big one.
It is a really big one. But also, like, I couldn't afford my car. I couldn't afford to go to the gym. I couldn't afford to give people gifts. And all those things surely have to carry on when you.
Surely. I mean, I completely agree. I think what it forced you to do is to see what your budget would have to be if you were to live only on the state pension. And the helpful thing about that is it tells you what you want your budget to be when you actually do get to that point in time. And the difference between those two things should really be guiding your pension contributions. So in our app, what we have is the retirement calculator, where people can easily check what they are predicted to get using some assumptions, of course, and how that stacks up compared to what they actually want to be spending in retirement. And so the classic rule of thumb is that you want to spend roughly 65% of your last working salary when you retire. And the question is, given what you've put into your pension, are you going to be able to do that? First of all, is that in line with what you expect to be spending given your retirement plans? And if not, then how can you make the changes that you need to make in order to be able to put more away? And those are really the questions that everybody has to answer for themselves, because as you say, otherwise your default position is to work into your 60s. And as we age more and more, and thankfully are also hopefully healthier as we continue to age, that may even change into your 70s. And if you want to be in control of that, of that important question of, when do I stop working? When do I, start to do other things or change my working habits, or, do this thing that I've delayed forever. If you want to be in control of that, you really have to be in control of what you have in your pension.
Yeah, because like ideally, I want to have that freedom by the age of 57.
Yeah.
Based on current calculations, that's not actually possible, because as you say, I've done that work with your calculator, and I've also done a little bit of work with some financial planning tools, where, so I know I'm aiming for about 300 grand in my pot. So I'm nearly 100, but I'm 44. It's not that much time to generate another 200 grand into my pension. So I'm all right about it. Like, I just have to carry on contributing like I'm doing.
Yes, and the thing with pensions is, as they grow bigger, the return on the investment becomes more meaningful. So a 7% return on a £100,000 pension is an extra £7,000, right? Which is, substantially bigger than a 7% return on a £1,000 pension. And, many of us will be starting at £1,000. So it's okay, because you have the tax incentives on your side to help you grow it, and then B, the investment returns. So, just keep thinking that the more progress you make, the easier it becomes to make further progress.
Yeah, and basically I need to try and lump as much as I can in now. As going back to that very sort of first statement you said, the earlier you start is the better.
Yeah.
but I'm in my 40s and didn't start taking it seriously till I was probably 40. So there is
our average customer is about 40. Right. So I think that it's because people do have a lot of priorities in their 20s. So housing priorities, children priorities in their 20s and 30s as well. And I think 40s, it definitely does start to become, I guess, realer, but also your disposable income increases.
Yeah, and also that situation's only going to get worse as time progresses. So because the average salaries like graduates are starting with in jobs now are not that much more than when I graduated. Like, I graduated in 99, so I know of loads of people who are earning less now than my first job. So like, come on. And if they're living in London, they've got like a massive rent to pay. Like, how can people afford money into their pension?
I think there's a lot of pressure on companies now to start paying the London living wage for, especially for people who live in London. So we're a London living wage employer. And, you do, of course, see the wages going up every year. One good thing this government is doing, I think, is committing to, to increasing wages across the board. And that should help as well. But it does, saving is the type of thing where you also have to make personal decisions to forego some things. And, coffee is one that we discussed. That's a fairly easy one. I have to say I'm pretty guilty of the coffee spend, but I have a Pret subscription now, so I am doing better. And I
saved you a lot, actually.
You actually save a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of coffees to break even on a Pret subscription, and there are other things as well, I think, and just I love takeaway as well, but I have definitely closed the app if I look at the number at the bottom and I think, you know what, I can eat a sandwich.
Yeah. Me. So doing my so I publish my spending diary every Monday, and that's so interesting. So I started at the beginning of lockdown, and I've done articles about it for newspapers and all sorts, because it's really interesting collection of data and information. Like, and I know Faith has done it as well, and we've compared a few times, but if you compare what I was spending in lockdown to what I was spending, when we were given our freedom this year, like April, May, Oh, I was literally spending like £1,000 a week sometimes.
You were making up for lost time, I think.
So I've pretty much cancelled out all the savings I made over I mean, probably not totally, but
No, I don't believe that.
I went crazy. Like I was seeing every single friend I hadn't seen for like a year. Because like also you have to bear in mind that like my husband left 3 days before lockdown. So at the beginning of lockdown, I was like, okay, I'm not allowed out. I've got my children here half the week. I don't have a husband anymore. I've got this massive house that I now own, which is brilliant, but I've got a massive mortgage to pay, and it was quite overwhelming.
Yes, I think lockdown was definitely not the way that life can continue. Even though there were some positives from it, I definitely don't think it's something that could ever be sustained, no matter how much it helps us save.
Yeah. Well, one of the big positives, I think, which was partly lockdown and also like customer research driven, was your fossil fuel free fund, which I mean, obviously that takes so I was talking to Claire Riley about it at the Green Live event the other week. She was telling me how complex a process it is to set up something like a fossil fuel free pension fund, because it was brand new, right? So yeah.
And the whole concept of not investing in oil companies just didn't exist even a year ago. So when we approached all of the various asset managers about something that would definitively and continuously exclude fossil fuel producers, there just wasn't anything on the market that we could just use. So we did have to wait for it to be created and developed, and use the voice of our customers, who were really the driving inspiration behind it, to get the asset managers to build it. And now thankfully it has, I think, become a bit more mainstream. I have to say, I'm seeing a lot more of this net zero stuff, which I don't completely subscribe to, because the commitment for net zero is so far into the future that any sort of leader making that commitment, their leadership lifespan is probably not going to be that long. That's just the basic average. That I think that we're at a point now, and I mean, I saw the dictionary is adding global heating to signal how much worse it is than global warming.
Wow.
Yeah, because a commitment to do something 10, 20, 30 years from now is not going to be good enough. It's just not going to be good enough. Or the commitment to plant trees somewhere, by then, is also not good enough. We don't have enough land space to plant all the trees that need to be planted. So and a lot of our customers feel that way, which is why we introduced the fossil fuel free pension.
Yeah, and the biggest environmental decision you can make as an individual, and you'll know the stats way better than me. So yeah, we can all go vegan, we can all buy a hybrid car or an electric car, but actually, if we take our pot of pension money and put that into fossil fuel free, then it has a far bigger impact on the environment than all those other things, doesn't it?
It has a bigger impact, and in many ways it's actually easier to do.
Yeah.
Going vegan, if you're not
really hard
doing it, if you're not already doing it, or you don't have the willpower to stop eating meat. I know I don't. I try to cut it out, but I don't have the power to say no all the time. That's really hard. I think doing something positive with your pension is actually a lot easier.
Yeah,
and it's a one-time thing that you do, whereas with some of these other changes, don't travel, don't eat meat, buy in secondhand shops only, or these are kind of ongoing things that are good to do, absolutely, but are really hard to do all the time.
Yeah. Yes. The whole environmental world is an interesting one. So that's almost like on the future of pensions, isn't it? So like if you were to crystal ball, like predict what's going to maybe happen in, I don't know, 10 years time or 20 years time, how do you think it's going to change?
I think in 10 to 20 years time, I see virtually everybody being quite comfortable with their pensions. As a country, they are still a bit confusing. I mean, probably about 30% of people don't realize their pensions are invested in shares.
Yeah.
And that, that will change, because as the money in your pension pot naturally grows from, and I am talking about the employed here, from employer contributions, it will go from £1,000 to £10,000 to £20,000, and it does start to get more interesting. So I think that generally 10 to 20 years from now, I see us being as familiar with our pensions as we are with our bank accounts. So that can only be a good thing. I think the other thing that I see happening is people using their voice a lot more for what is actually in their pension. We survey our customers, and a majority of them want their pensions to yield returns, but also to be productive for society. And that view is actually very different to the view that people held many years ago, and I think a minority of people still hold, which is that people only want their pensions to be focused on on return. So I think the views of your pension and the impact that it has over a 20-30 year period for you financially and for the world that it lives in, I think that view is just going to get stronger and stronger, that those two things need to tie together, which is great for society. And then finally, I'm hopeful that we'll have more technology. We've been working on the pension dashboard for a while. I'm on the government's steering group, and it has been going on for many years. It is slow progress, but it's a huge government project. It was always going to be like this. And I think in the first instance, let's get something out there. I think there is now a good plan to get something out there. And hopefully that can help modernize the pension system a bit more.
Yeah. So the pension dashboard, just describe what that is in like a couple of sentences.
Yeah, it's a place where you will be able to go in and type a bit of information about yourself, and then it will show you the pensions that you've had from your previous employments that you may not be aware of. We know that roughly £20 billion of pension money is lost, and so it will help reunite people with those pensions. That's the aim for it. I think the industry has a lot of very high expectations for the dashboard, that it's going to tell you what to do with your whole life. That is unlikely to be delivered in the first iteration. In the first iteration, it's going to help you find lost pensions, and that is a good starting point.
I don't think the government can tell us what to do with our whole life, and I don't want the government telling me what to do with my whole life. That's what therapists are for.
Yes.
Oh,
not the dashboard. Agreed.
That's right. I think that's all of my bullet points that we've covered very beautifully flowing through. That was so interesting. Like I love it's almost like we went back, then we dealt with the current, and then we've gone to the future. It's just a fascinating world, and I'm so like passionate about it. I'm passionate about women in particular. Just understand what's going on with your pensions, understand how much is in it, what that's worth when you reach retirement age, and if there's a gap, then you need to start putting some more money into it. It's a savings pot at the end of the day, isn't it? And we do need to be saving money, not just spending it.
Indeed.
Yes. So yeah, thank you ever so much. So if people want to like follow you, you've got a Twitter account.
I do.
Which you put lots of stuff on, so and it is actually you, it's not just somebody.
It is me.
It's not somebody running it for you. Yeah, obviously like check out PensionBee and all the work I do with PensionBee. If you type in like Lynn Beattie PensionBee blog into Google, it comes up with all the pieces I've ever written that are on your blog, which
amazing.
is quite a lot. Cool. Thank you ever so much. That was brilliant. And thank you for your time.
Very welcome.
And
Really
thank you people for watching and listening.
Thank you.
Let's stay there.